How Inuits survived the Arctic. What if I told you that there are people who sleep inside houses made entirely of ice, in temperatures cold enough to freeze your breath mid-air, and wake up warmer than you do in your heated bedroom? The Inuit people have been doing exactly this for over 4,000 years. And the most mind-blowing part? The techniques they developed to survive in the Arctic are so ingenious that modern survival experts are still learning from them today. But here's what nobody tells you. If you tried to survive the Arctic using common sense and modern outdoor gear, you'd be dead within 48 hours. Everything you think you know about staying warm is wrong in the Arctic. And the Inuit figured this out thousands of years before we had thermodynamics or material science. Let me paint you a picture of what we're actually talking about here. Imagine standing in a place where the temperature regularly drops to negative 50 degrees Fahrenheit. That's not a typo. Negative 50. At that temperature, exposed skin freezes in under 5 minutes. Your eyelashes freeze together when you blink. The moisture in your breath turns to ice crystals before it leaves your mouth. The sun disappears completely for months during the polar night, leaving you in total darkness. And perhaps most terrifying of all, you're standing on an ocean. A frozen ocean, yes, but one that can crack open beneath your feet without warning, plunging you into water so cold that you have maybe 60 seconds before your muscles stop working and you drown. This is the Arctic. This is home for the Inuit people. And somehow, not only did they survive here, they built one of the most successful cultures in human history, lasting millennia in an environment that kills modern equipped explorers regularly. So what do they know that we don't? Let's start with the most iconic image, the igloo. You've seen pictures. A dome made of snow blocks with a small entrance. It looks primitive, maybe even fragile. Here's what's absolutely crazy. An igloo, built correctly by someone who knows what they're doing, can maintain an internal temperature of up to 60 degrees Fahrenheit, warmer than the outside air. Let me say that again. Outside, negative 40 degrees. Inside, positive 20 degrees. That's a temperature difference of 60 degrees, created using nothing but snow, ice, and ancient knowledge. No heaters, no electricity, no modern insulation. Just frozen water arranged in a specific way. But how is this even possible? Snow is frozen water. Cold is cold, right? Wrong. This is where the Inuit understanding of their environment becomes absolutely brilliant. Snow, despite being cold, is actually one of the best insulators in nature. Here's why. Snow is mostly air. When snow falls and accumulates, it traps countless tiny air pockets between the ice crystals. Air is an excellent insulator. It doesn't conduct heat well at all. So a wall of compacted snow is essentially a wall of trapped air pockets. The Inuit discovered that if you cut snow into blocks and stack them in a dome shape, you create a structure where the cold air outside cannot efficiently transfer its temperature inside. But that's just the beginning. The dome shape itself is critical. A dome is one of the strongest architectural forms in existence. It distributes weight and pressure evenly across its entire surface. This means an igloo can support enormous weight, including polar bears walking across the top, despite being made of something as fragile as compressed snow. The Inuit knew this centuries before. European architects started building domed cathedrals. They understood structural engineering through pure observation and experimentation. Now here's where it gets even more fascinating. The entrance to an igloo is always built below ground level. You have to crawl down and then up to get inside. Why? Because cold air sinks. It's heavier than warm air. By building the entrance lower than the living space, the Inuit created a cold trap. The coldest air flows down and out through the entrance tunnel, while the warm air, generated by body heat and small oil lamps, rises and stays in the dome. This is passive climate control designed by people who never went to engineering school. They just watched how air behaves and designed their homes accordingly. But living in an ice house presents some unique challenges that the Inuit had to solve. Challenge number 1. Breathing. When you exhale, you release warm, moist air. In a sealed space, this moisture would normally condense on the walls and ceiling. In an igloo, this condensation would freeze, creating ice buildup that would eventually make the structure collapse. The solution? Ventilation holes. Small, carefully placed holes in the dome that allow moisture to escape while preventing heat loss. Too big, you lose all your heat. Too small, you suffocate, or the walls collapse. The Inuit calculated this balance perfectly through generations of trial and error. Challenge number 2. Light. During the polar night, the sun doesn't rise for months. Total darkness. The Inuit solution? They would cut a window into the igloo wall and fill it with clear ice or seal intestine stretched thin. This created a translucent window that let in ambient light during the brief twilight periods while still maintaining insulation. They invented windows that didn't lose heat. Think about that. Medieval European castles had drafty openings or expensive glass that still leaked heat. The Inuit had better window technology using materials they found in nature. If you're watching this and thinking about how incredible it is that indigenous knowledge systems developed solutions that rival or exceed modern technology, hit that subscribe button, because these stories deserve to be preserved and shared, and every subscription helps keep this forgotten wisdom alive for future generations. Now let's talk about staying warm, because this is where Inuit survival technology becomes truly extraordinary. You might think the key to surviving Arctic cold is wearing as much clothing as possible, layer upon layer of the thickest, warmest materials you can find. That's what early European explorers did, and they died, frequently, from hypothermia, while wearing what they thought was the warmest gear available. Meanwhile, the Inuit stayed comfortable wearing what looked like much less clothing. What did they know? The answer is everything. The Inuit developed the most sophisticated cold weather clothing system ever created. And it's based on principles that modern outdoor gear is only now starting to fully adopt. First principle: air is the insulator, not the material. The Inuit wear 2 layers of caribou fur. The inner layer has the fur facing inward, against the skin. The outer layer has fur facing outward. Between these 2 layers, trapped air. That air gap, heated by body warmth, is what keeps you alive. The caribou fur itself is hollow. Each individual hair is a tiny tube of trapped air. So you have air-filled hairs creating an air gap between 2 layers. It's insulation within insulation. The thermal efficiency is incredible. But here's the genius part. The clothing is loose, not tight. Loose. European explorers wore tight-fitting wool and cotton, trying to trap heat close to the body. They sweated. Sweat soaked into their clothing. Wet clothing in Arctic conditions is a death sentence. Moisture conducts heat away from your body 25 times faster than dry air. You sweat, your clothes get wet, you freeze to death. The Inuit understood this instinctively. Loose clothing allows air circulation. It prevents overheating. It lets moisture evaporate before it can soak into the fur. You stay dry, you stay alive. The material choice is equally important. Caribou fur is naturally water resistant. The hollow hairs don't absorb moisture. If snow falls on you, you can simply brush it off. European wool absorbs water. It gets heavy. It loses all insulating properties when wet. The Inuit also used sealskin for outer layers in wet conditions. Sealskin is completely waterproof, flexible even in extreme cold, and incredibly durable. They created the first true waterproof, breathable outerwear centuries before Gore-Tex was invented. And the construction techniques. Every seam was sewn with sinew thread, coated with animal fat to make it waterproof. The stitching pattern itself was designed to prevent wind penetration. Hoods were oversized and lined with wolverine fur, specifically wolverine, because wolverine fur doesn't frost up when you breathe into it. Every other fur type accumulates ice from your breath. Wolverine doesn't. The Inuit noticed this property and specifically hunted wolverines just for hood trim. That's the level of detailed environmental knowledge we're talking about. But clothing and shelter are just the beginning. The real secret to Inuit survival is something much more fundamental: diet. The Inuit diet is almost entirely meat and fat. Very little plant matter. In the Arctic, there are no fruits, no vegetables, no grains for most of the year. The traditional Inuit diet is about 90% fat and protein, 10% carbohydrates. When anthropologists first studied this, they expected to find populations suffering from malnutrition, scurvy, heart disease. They found the opposite. The Inuit were remarkably healthy. Strong bones, healthy hearts, almost no tooth decay. How? The answer lies in what they eat and how they prepare it. Seal meat, whale blubber, fish, caribou, walrus. These animals are incredibly rich in omega-3 fatty acids, vitamins A and D, and complete proteins. The Inuit eat these animals almost entirely raw or lightly fermented. Cooking destroys vitamin C. Raw meat preserves it. The Inuit get their vitamin C from raw seal liver, whale skin, and fermented fish. They never get scurvy, despite having almost no access to citrus fruits or vegetables. They discovered through necessity what nutritionists only confirmed recently. You can get every nutrient humans need from animal sources if you eat the entire animal and prepare it correctly. The fat consumption is equally important for survival. Fat is the most calorie-dense food available. In an environment where you can burn 6,000 to 8,000 calories per day, just maintaining your body temperature, you need concentrated energy. A pound of whale blubber contains about 4,000 calories. It's survival fuel. The Inuit body actually adapted over generations to metabolize fat more efficiently than populations from warmer climates. Recent genetic studies have found that Inuit populations have specific gene variants that allow them to process high-fat diets without the negative cardiovascular effects that would impact other populations. Evolution in action. But getting this food requires hunting in conditions that would kill most modern humans before they even found game. Let's talk about Arctic hunting, because this is where Inuit knowledge becomes almost supernatural in its sophistication. Hunting seals in the Arctic requires understanding animal behavior, ice conditions, weather patterns, and having patience that would break most people. Seals live under the ice during winter. They create breathing holes, small openings in the ice where they surface to breathe. These holes can be miles apart. A seal might have several holes and rotate between them unpredictably. An Inuit hunter's job is to find these breathing holes, determine which ones are active, and wait. Waiting means standing motionless in negative 40-degree weather, sometimes for 6 to 8 hours, waiting for a seal to surface. When it does surface, you have approximately 2 seconds to strike with a harpoon before it disappears. Miss? And you've wasted an entire day in conditions cold enough to cause frostbite. How do the Inuit do this successfully? First, they can read ice. They can look at snow coverage and ice coloration and determine where breathing holes are likely to be located. They understand seal behavior so well that they can predict which holes will be used and when. They've developed harpoon technology that includes a detachable head connected to a float, so that even if the seal dives after being struck, the float prevents it from escaping under the ice. They invented toggle head harpoons that rotate 90 degrees after penetration, making them almost impossible to pull out. This is sophisticated tool design developed through centuries of iteration. They also hunt in ways that seem impossible. Polar bear hunting. Polar bears are the largest land predators on Earth. An adult male can weigh 1,500 pounds and run 30 miles per hour. They have no natural predators. They fear nothing. The Inuit hunt them with spears and knives. Successfully. The technique involves understanding polar bear behavior well enough to predict their movements, using dogs to track and corner the bear, and then facing it in combat with weapons that require you to be within striking distance of the most dangerous predator in the Arctic. This requires courage, but more importantly, it requires knowledge. Knowledge of animal behavior, knowledge of ice conditions that might give you an advantage, knowledge of exactly where to strike to bring down an animal that can decapitate you with one swipe. If you're amazed by how these survival techniques represent thousands of years of accumulated knowledge, and you believe this wisdom should be documented and shared, subscribe to this channel. Every subscription helps preserve these stories and supports the creation of more content exploring the incredible achievements of indigenous peoples around the world. Let's talk about navigation, because getting lost in the Arctic is a death sentence. There are no landmarks. During winter, everything is white. Snow and ice in every direction. During the polar night, there's no sun to navigate by. Compasses don't work reliably near the magnetic pole. GPS didn't exist for 99.9% of Inuit history, so how did they navigate across hundreds of miles of featureless terrain? The Inuit developed multiple navigation systems that work in tandem. First, they read snow. Wind in the Arctic blows predominantly from certain directions. This creates patterns in the snow called sastrugi, parallel ridges carved by wind. These ridges maintain consistent orientation. An experienced Inuit traveler can feel these ridges through their feet even in total darkness and maintain accurate direction. They navigate by touch. They also read the sky. Even during the polar night, there's ambient light from stars, aurora, and twilight. The Inuit learned to read cloud formations that indicate open water or land. Clouds reflect light differently depending on what's beneath them. A dark cloud base means open water. A light cloud base means ice. This is called water sky and ice blink. They can detect the presence of open water from 20 miles away just by looking at clouds. Stars provide navigation, but not in the way you might think. The North Star isn't particularly useful when you're already at the North Pole. Instead, the Inuit memorized the entire sky. They know which stars rise and set at which times of year. They know which constellations indicate seasonal changes. They can navigate by star positions with accuracy that rivals modern instruments. They also use animals. Certain bird species migrate along predictable routes. Following these birds indicates the direction to open water or land. The behavior of seals and whales indicates ice conditions ahead. If seals are abundant, the ice is stable. If they disappear, major ice breakup might be imminent. But perhaps most impressive is their use of memory and oral tradition. Inuit elders memorize hundreds of miles of coastline. They remember every distinctive ice formation, every rocky outcrop, every place where currents create specific ice patterns. This information is passed down through stories. Navigation instructions are embedded in songs and legends. A story about a hunting trip contains within it exact directions for traveling between locations. The narrative structure helps memorization. This is why oral tradition was so important. It wasn't just cultural, it was survival technology. The stories contained the knowledge needed to stay alive. Now let's discuss something that sounds impossible. Staying healthy in an environment where a small cut can become life-threatening and where medical help is hundreds of miles away. The Inuit developed medical knowledge that rivals modern wilderness medicine in some respects. They understood hypothermia treatment. If someone falls through ice and gets wet, you have minutes to act. The Inuit method: strip off all wet clothing immediately, even in extreme cold. Naked skin loses heat slower than wet clothing. Then, wrap the person in dry furs and place them between two other people for shared body heat. They understood that rewarding frozen limbs too quickly causes shock. They knew to warm the core first, extremities later. They treated frostbite using animal fat and specific plant materials during summer months. They could perform emergency amputations of frozen digits to prevent gangrene from spreading. They set broken bones using splints made from driftwood or bone. They treated snow blindness, a condition where UV light reflected off snow burns your corneas, using wooden goggles with narrow slits that reduce light exposure while still allowing vision. These were the first sunglasses, invented thousands of years ago out of survival necessity. They also understood nutrition in ways that prevented disease. Eating raw liver prevents scurvy. Eating fermented fish provides probiotics that aid digestion. The fermentation process also makes certain nutrients more bioavailable. They discovered through observation and experimentation what molecular biology has only recently confirmed. But here's something that gets overlooked: the psychological survival techniques. Living in darkness for months, in temperatures that confine you to small spaces with the same people constantly, with the knowledge that a storm or ice breakup could kill you at any moment, this creates enormous psychological stress. The Inuit developed cultural practices specifically to manage this. Storytelling sessions that lasted for hours, creating entertainment and preserving knowledge. Complex games that required skill and provided competition. Song duels where disputes were resolved through improvised singing competitions rather than violence. These weren't just cultural quirks. They were psychological survival tools designed to maintain mental health in conditions that could drive people insane. They also understood the importance of community. In the Arctic, individual survival is nearly impossible. You need cooperation. The Inuit developed sharing protocols where successful hunters distributed meat to everyone in the community. This wasn't altruism, it was survival strategy. Today, you catch nothing. Tomorrow, I catch nothing. But together, we ensure everyone eats. Hoarding food could get you exiled, which in the Arctic is equivalent to a death sentence. The harsh environment enforced cooperation as a survival necessity. Let's talk about something modern survivalists obsess over: fire. In the Arctic, traditional fire-making materials are scarce or absent. No wood for hundreds of miles in many areas. The Inuit solution? Blubber lamps. These are stone or soapstone lamps filled with seal oil and lit with a wick made from moss or animal fiber. A well-made blubber lamp can burn for hours on minimal fuel, providing light and heat. The flame is controlled by adjusting the wick and the amount of oil. An experienced person can adjust a blubber lamp to provide exactly the amount of heat needed without wasting fuel or creating smoke. This is precision fire control achieved with Stone Age technology. They also use driftwood when available, but here's what's interesting. They knew which driftwood to use. Wood that's been in salt water burns hotter and with less smoke than fresh wood. They could identify wood type by appearance and weight. They knew which wood was best for cooking, which was best for heat, which created too much smoke. They turned scarcity into expertise. Modern survival experts talk about the rule of threes. You can survive 3 minutes without air, 3 hours without shelter in extreme conditions, 3 days without water, 3 weeks without food. The Inuit would probably laugh at this oversimplification. They survived by understanding that everything is connected. Shelter design affects heat retention, which affects calorie expenditure, which affects food requirements. Clothing design affects mobility, which affects hunting success, which affects food availability. Weather patterns affect ice conditions, which affect travel safety, which affects access to hunting grounds. The Inuit didn't learn individual survival skills. They learned an entire system of interconnected knowledge. And here's what makes their achievement even more remarkable. They did all of this while maintaining a rich cultural life. They created art, intricate carvings from ivory and bone, clothing decorated with incredibly detailed beadwork and embroidery. They developed complex mythology and storytelling traditions. They had music, dance, games, and spiritual practices. They weren't just surviving. They were living full human lives in conditions that would reduce most modern people to desperate struggle. So what can we learn from the Inuit? What's the takeaway for people who will never set foot in the Arctic? I think it's this. Human beings are capable of adapting to almost anything if we pay attention, if we learn from our environment, if we cooperate, and if we preserve and pass down knowledge. The Inuit survived the Arctic not because they were superhuman, but because they were exceptionally observant, patient, and willing to learn from both success and failure over thousands of years. Their techniques work because they're based on deep understanding of physics, biology, animal behavior, weather patterns, and human psychology. They didn't have formal science, but they had something equally powerful: empirical observation over countless generations. Every technique was tested by the ultimate measure. Does it keep you alive or not? The techniques that worked were preserved and refined. The techniques that failed were abandoned. This is natural selection applied to knowledge itself. What's tragic is that much of this knowledge is being lost. Climate change is altering the Arctic faster than any other place on Earth. Ice patterns that were predictable for thousands of years are now chaotic. Animals are changing migration patterns. The environmental knowledge that took millennia to accumulate is becoming obsolete within a single generation. Young Inuit are moving to towns and cities, trading traditional skills for modern conveniences. This is understandable. Living traditionally in the Arctic is incredibly hard. But each person who doesn't learn the old ways represents thousands of years of knowledge lost. Efforts are being made to preserve this knowledge. Elder programs where traditional skills are taught to young people. Documentation projects recording techniques before the last people who know them die. But it's a race against time. This is why content like this matters. Why preserving and sharing these stories matters. Because the Inuit didn't just survive the Arctic, they mastered it. They proved that human intelligence, observation, cooperation, and determination can overcome even the most extreme challenges nature presents. The next time you're cold, think about what cold really means. You're probably in a heated building, wearing modern clothing, with food and water readily available. The Inuit faced cold that would kill you in minutes, with none of these advantages, and they not only survived, but thrived for thousands of years. That's not just survival. That's triumph. That's humanity at its most resilient and ingenious. And that's the real lesson of Inuit survival knowledge. There's no environment so hostile that humans can't adapt to it if we're willing to learn, observe, and work together. The techniques are fascinating. But the mindset behind them is what truly matters. Patient observation, careful experimentation, respect for the environment, willingness to learn from failure, cooperation over competition, preservation and transmission of knowledge. These principles work whether you're surviving the Arctic or navigating modern life. The Inuit turned the deadliest place on Earth into home. They looked at conditions that said, "Nothing can live here," and responded by building a civilization that lasted longer than most empires. They did it with ice, snow, animal skins, and brilliant observation. No factories, no modern materials, just human intelligence applied consistently over thousands of years. That's worth remembering. That's worth preserving. And that's why their story deserves to be told.